everybody, how you doing? Everyone feeling good, feeling excited? We're in Cannes, we're so lucky, aren't we? Just to introduce myself, my name's Nylander and I'm the lovely moderator for this panel today. I run my own marketing consultancy called Wildflowers of London. I'm going to let my lovely panellists introduce themselves, and we're going to start over here with Hannah.
Lovely. Hello everyone. I'm Hannah. I am a group director at Matterkind, which is the programmatic and addressable arm of IPG. Okay.
Hello everyone, I'm Janny. I'm working at Adswizz as business director for Southern Europe, and I'm very happy to be there.
Hello, my name is Elli, Dimitroulakos. I am with Acast, a global podcast marketplace, and I am excited to be here as well.
Awesome. So we're going to be here. The panel's called Can You Hear Me Now? And can you actually hear us? And if we need to speak up, just, give us some signs so that we obviously project our voices. But we're going to start off with a bit of fun and a bit of an icebreaker for the girls. So I'm going to ask you some true and false questions, and I want you to raise up your paddles and let us know. So let's start off with this one. Digital audio, specifically podcasts, have been the fastest growing media for the past several years. Is that true or false, according to you?
True.
Indeed, you are correct.
Has to be true,
Next
guys.
one. There is evidence of a positive correlation between listenership and ad spending. So the amount of people listening correlates with the amount of money that the industry is putting into it. False. And you all are indeed correct again. So this is why we had them. They're experts, right? Okay, data and targeting. We're going to ask you a question about that. Digital audio has rich data for advanced targeting. Yes or no? Oh! Whoa, that's what I'm talking about. We've got a split. So, why? Hannah.
She's looking at me again.
Why, Hannah? Why do you think that? You're in my eye line.
I know, I should have sat there. I think there is data there, and there's more that's coming, but just on a base level, from what you can track and target in audio as a space is a little bit more limited unless you're in a specific setup. So maybe it's with Spotify, for example. They have a setup that allows you to do that, but then outside of that it's a little bit more difficult. It's kind of in the bag of some of the other emerging channels where you've got CTV. A lot of it is going to be a bit more kind of contextual or matching to audiences, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but if you're coming at it from the rest of sort of programmatic buys where people are used to being able to really zoom in on an audience, it's quite a different spin.
Okay, well that is something that we're going to delve into a bit deeper in the panel later, so hopefully we can all clarify. No, you were good, babe. Yeah, I loved it. Keep chatting, that's what you're here for. Right. Next one. There is a culture of innovation and experimentation within the audio industry. True or false?
I would say yeah.
Is that true?
Oh, that's true. Yeah, sorry.
Good,
for the cam.
Good. And then finally, digital audio has no hurdles to overcome, for it's a constant part of the marketing mix. You can see a marketer from that question.
That's a trick question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we'll go into this, and those actually that sets up our panel beautifully, because those are the things that we're going to be sort of chatting about. So I asked you all who you are and introduce yourself. I'm quite keen to kick off and get into the nitty gritty. So I'm going to start with you, Elli. How are you and your partners adapting your digital strategies to keep up with sort of the evolving demands of today's consumers and also advertisers as well?
Yeah, a big part is about education, making sure that advertisers understand the value of podcasting and audio, where it sits in the mix, and then really educating around how to take traditional digital buying and apply it to podcasting. It is very nuanced, it's new, and then find areas where you can mirror what you've currently been doing or learn new ways of activating podcasting that is unique to that medium, and then really diving into the medium for what it's worth versus coming with preconceived notions. So education around that, how are we innovating together, maybe removing some preconceived notions on how to do it in digital and podcasting, and coming with a fresh set of eyes around measurement, around content, especially content, even things like brand safety, for example, in podcasting around all of those adult conversations versus what brand safety might mean in display and video. Okay. And so a very big piece is education, I think.
Yeah, no, I think education's key. And Hannah, obviously you work agency side. How are you educating your clients, and especially when it comes to sort of emerging channels like audio?
Yeah, it's kind of similar to what Elli said, and I think we take a similar approach with the other channels that are coming into programmatic, so like CTV and just out of home, like I've said. And I think it depends on kind of the situation and what people already know, but education is key because you're used to buying TV style in a certain way, and you're used to buying audio in a certain way, and even though kind of podcasts are a new almost inventory source and a new platform, sometimes it's approached in the same sort of way that you would have done linear radio, or just kind of put in the same sort of bag. So for us, we try and educate on, forget the preconceived ideas. This is what you can do, this is how it's going to benefit your brand specifically, and this is how to use it, as opposed to trying to compare it to other options or other routes. And sometimes you have to do that, but I think it's about kind of showing the value at face value for that channel.
And do you think the clients are more amenable to spending in digital means, or are you still finding that a bit of a challenge?
It depends. I think the easiest route in is always that programmatic, and all of these channels coming into programmatic means that there's more flexibility, and that's what draws a lot of people into the space in the first place. But then back to your question earlier around like the innovation and all of that, there is also more scope to have testing and innovation, because whilst it's maybe not the most advanced in terms of tracking, when you do have it programmatically, there's a bit more kind of control that you can have to test and to maybe link up different channels. We have a few campaigns that are linking things like out of home and audio, and kind of trying to link up that consumer journey a little bit more.
Awesome. Janny, it's your turn now.
Yes.
So I'm coming to you. So we've talked about sort of that there are listeners and not necessarily the pounds sort of mirroring that. But who do you think is doing it well? So do you have any examples of some clients that you're working with that have able to capture the benefits of programmatic audio and have done some good campaigns, or some things that you would like to share?
Yes, of course. Being global means that we are able to see the differences and the trends in the different markets. To give you an example, Europe has started to shift into programmatic in 2015. Then with COVID time, we saw a slowdown of the programmatic adoption. Yeah. But in France, the market is very strong. We have 70% of the programmatic buying of the media that come through programmatic buying, and a lot of our advertisers are using this channel for flexibility, as you said, as well for efficiency. And we have some campaign that we are running, such as Audio Pixel. So the Audio Pixel is an innovative ad format that Adswizz proposed, that is adopted by the French publisher, and it allows to track in real time the conversion. So this is something that programmatic allows.
Awesome. So like I'm a retail brand and I've got, I don't know, a product that I'm sort of selling, and I can track the advertising on a podcast?
Yeah, exactly. Your brand, you put a pixel and you are able to track your campaign and see if it generates conversion. And actually it does. We increase average 4 times, we have 4 times higher level of conversion than a display campaign.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah.
Awesome.
Everyone should try.
So brands shouldn't be afraid of spending in audio, because you can actually track it the same that you can with other channels.
Yeah, and with better results.
Elli, are you seeing the same sort of trends, obviously with the US market being a bit more advanced in audio? Are you seeing the same things, or what do you see?
Yes, so similarly, we do see that some European markets were earlier adopters of programmatic, and we do see that the French is one of them, in the UK as well. In the US, programmatic continues to grow.
Yeah.
And what we're seeing is more, whereas like in France, for example, we see a lot of programmatic guaranteed. In the US, we see a lot of demand. It's split between private marketplaces and programmatic guaranteed. And then from there, once the I guess the testing aspect of programmatic for podcasting began, the next evolution of that is, okay, now I would like to measure it, and I'd like to know for every dollar I spent how much I receive in return. And so similar trends, I think, around programmatic activation and measurement as well.
Quick detour, because you said something and now it's triggered a question in my head. Programmatic guaranteed, just in case some people are not necessarily aware of that, kind of give us what is it and what are the benefits for it for advertisers?
The programmatic guarantee deal is a pre-negotiated deal that really is about a certain level of investment at a certain time frame, whereas private marketplace is more like real-time bidding. Like the stock market, you're bidding on the impressions as you prefer at your own leisure. If you want it, you buy it, and you bid on it and you buy it. So it's less of a guaranteed investment, and we see a lot of PMPs being adapted in the US because it's a very large test market still. A lot of advertisers are trying to understand where podcasting sits in their media buying decisioning, and so PMPs are good at testing before committing. It's like a pre-date to a date.
Pre-date. Nice. I like that analogy. Hannah, and from an agency perspective, are you sort of seeing the same sort of trends in the UK with sort of people spending on PMP versus PG and the like?
Yeah, I think in the UK, I would say that it's still a little bit fragmented and similar actually across some of the other e-markets that we work with. Just because with kind of where we have with GDPR and everything as well, using sometimes the PMP setup, you would be doing that against maybe a content list or something. So it's a little bit more fractured in that sense. But if we wanted to use anybody's data, so whether that's Acast data or Spotify's data or somebody, we kind of sometimes would need to do that more so in maybe a PG setting just to ensure that we can get the inventory out. But I think it's probably a healthier mix of that. And I think we're now starting to see a bit more of maybe like grouped PMP deals, so kind of putting some publishers together and increasing that pool of inventory against a certain vertical or something in that sense. So it's starting to mature a bit more, but I think we've also seen, particularly in the UK, a little bit of reluctance to actually adopt it programmatically, just because... I think it's because, again, just coming back to, it's a new channel that, whilst we do have these options with the pixel and we can measure, it's not as dynamically measurable maybe as other digital channels. And a lot of times what we actually see is people end up saying, oh, we would love to do some digital audio, but actually what we're going to do is a really big partnership and we'll do a sponsored read with Acast or a sponsored playlist with Spotify, and we're just going to do that separately. And I think we're starting to now see a shift where people actually see it as, again, a bit more of an efficiency channel, where we've got these results that show that having it in the mix will support your brand and maybe support lower funnel. And so now that's starting to build. But I think we did have a period where a lot of that spend, we would talk about digital audio and then it would all go into like a partnership, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but in order to kind of unlock that further potential for the channel, moving into programmatic is definitely like a key thing for that.
So what I'm hearing there is that there's still an education job to be done with the clients about how programmatic audio, digital audio can facilitate sort of more campaigns that are more like cost per acquisition focused, or maybe like lower funnel or lower down the funnel. Yeah,
I mean, it's always going to be hard to, I think, get a campaign in, and it depends on the client, but for something for audio, right, to like do something super lower funnel, but there is the attribution to show that it impacts that. I think there's also been a lot of work done in the space of tracking to allow us to now have things like brand lift studies and other more indicative or maybe abstract measures of performance against brand, which is where I think it sits quite well as a channel, but that people were a bit nervous to do because they couldn't see that value add.
Yeah, and I find it quite interesting that there is that sort of reluctance in terms of using brand studies or brand lift and stuff like that, because we all know that sound is one of the most evocative sorts of senses, and I can listen to a song that I used to listen to when I was like 14 or 15, and I can tell you the words word for word. I can tell you when it was played. I can tell you all these kind of things. So the fact that there is still that reluctance, sometimes I find it slightly strange, because audio for me is such a great sense that I can see how that would create a great brand lift when it comes to from an advertising perspective. So, Anna, I feel like I'm picking on you, but
you are,
I am, but I'm not doing it on purpose, because you're an agency person and we love hearing from agencies. So I've got one more question for you, and then I swear I'll mix it up. I'm going to pick on them too, right?
Yeah.
So, can. What do you think? So, what are the specific sort of challenges that you've sort of encountered when you've been trying to sort of navigate sort of transformation in the digital space? So, you could talk about it from a personal perspective, or when you're working with clients.
Yeah. Honestly, I think the biggest challenge is just getting the first step of that testing over the line. It takes a lot of convincing. It's almost like that curve that you see, right, where it's like it takes a lot of convincing to get the first one or two things signed off, to get people to accept the premise or to accept the concept. And then once you've kind of done that, it starts to unlock. And we've talked about it a lot, but education is a super key piece in that space. And I think looking at audio specifically, some of the big challenges have been, I touched on them earlier, but just like, what is the targeting that I can really get? Like, are you sure that my audience is really listening to those podcasts?
Yeah.
Like, for example, we've run some campaigns before where, just as like a generic demographic audience, you're looking at like women 18 to 34. And then you set that up actually, and you give maybe some of the behavioural statements, and we worked with Acast to do that. And then we come back and we get like a list together of a grouped like a PG deal of the podcast that we go against. And some of the things that come out of that are not what you would maybe expect a woman 18 to 34 to be listening to. And then the client's sort of going, are you sure that that's right? And there's a lot of research and things out there to show that is correct. But it's one of those things that you kind of just have to keep showing that. And then the other thing is also, I think creative is another one. Just because there's two arguments. One is that, if you've got a video ad, you can have an audio ad. So a lot of clients are maybe hesitant because they don't have the assets, don't have the budget to make the assets. And then the other side of that is, okay, great, well, we've done a couple of test campaigns, we've used the audio, but actually you probably do need to invest in an actual audio ad, because to your point, it's very immersive and it's a very specific type of experience. And there's some brands that do that really well.
Who?
Just Eat is one of ours that do that. I can hear the jingle in my head now. I won't sing it, but it's like there in my mind.
Just eat.
Yeah, it's like, it's good. And then some of I think you guys will have a bunch of case studies. Some are like the ASMR sounds and things like that. I think
say ASMR just for if people don't really know. I mean, I love
I
that,
don't know what it even stands for.
Yeah, but what does it?
It's those like really intimate sound. Oh god, like I don't know how to explain it now. Like I think Headspace did it before.
Yeah,
they had a meditative sounding. It sounded like you're in a meditation session, and that was the sound of the ad. And then at the end, you realise that it's Headspace, and it's just giving you that real key sense of a sound. So I think that's an important one, and that's where I think also there's some partners out there who can kind of help with that creative build, and there's ones like A Million Ads who can also help you to move that into now like dynamic creative and DCO, which again is super powerful, because just a little bit of personalization can also help to set that apart.
I'm gonna keep going with this jargon busters. What do you mean by DCO?
Yeah, so dynamic creative, so in a sense of just having them. We did it again for Just Eat, where we had like a location-based campaign. Yeah. So being able to say like, hey Bristol, hey Birmingham, like whatever that is, and it just gives an extra kind of flavour to it. It's not something that's super hard to do, but again, an immersive experience. So hearing that called out psychologically is quite positive for the campaign.
Janny, are you with Adswizz? Are you seeing an adoption of DCO?
Yeah, a lot. By the way, we have a lot of case study to share, so you can as well go to the website and check. But we have one with Corona, and a lot of advertiser brands and publisher now make the educational part and explain that if you personalize and do creativity, then you create a meaningful ad experience and you have better results. So we are proposing DCO as well, and we do as well a lot of innovation regarding the creative that we can propose. Voice ad is one of them. That you can interact and you can have a conversation with your audience. That is very powerful.
Quickly tell me how that works.
So you have a spot that will talk directly to the audience and say, if you want to know more about something, then you should say yes at the end of the audio, and then you create a very natural conversation with the audience, and it creates way more engagement. We had one campaign in France for Franche-Comté Tourism Office.
Oh, you sound so bad.
Yeah,
so
you can.
You
want to do the spot? I know you know the spot.
Well, it's the écoutez.
Écoutez. Yeah, to promote
I don't
the
sound
autumn.
as nice as you when you do.
And yeah, it's massive when you create this type of conversation with your audience. Then the engagement is much higher. And you can as well do some brand leaf study to show the effectiveness of the ad.
That's awesome. I really didn't know that there were ads that you could sort of say yes to. So every day's a school day, right? I learned something new today. Elli, I'm going to come to you and ask you about sort of challenges as well. So how has sort of Acast sort of coming up with products that sort of deal with measurement challenges and things in that area?
Yeah, I think we've touched on a lot of them already, and Hannah mentioned a lot of the solutions for creative, right? Because that was one of the biggest barriers, was what kind of creative will resonate here. We don't want to interrupt the user experience. It's a very intimate one, and if you interrupt it, it will negatively impact the effects. And so we have a product at Acast called Sponsorship Plus, and what it does is it takes the traditional way of buying media and it gives advertisers the ability to use the voiceover of a host or a sponsor that they know their clients or consumers really like, and they'll take that and create 30-second pre-recorded audio ads that they can then use to scale across our marketplace. And so it's taking a tradition, like I wouldn't even call it traditional, but that initial way of buying podcasting was based on the sponsor and the host read, and taking that experience and applying it to a much more scalable pre-recorded ad, takes away the threat that advertisers experienced around 30-second pre-recorded, because they felt that discomfort, like, well, what should my audio sound like? Will it be like a sponsorship? Will it be so intimate? And so that was one solution. Taking that a step further with dynamic creative allocation and optimizations is all about data.
Yeah.
And so we have, because of the fragmentation Hannah mentioned a few times, and because of the lack of the data signals that RSS feed technology has, we haven't been able to really utilize data in a way that gives us measurement and audience targeting. So one of the things we did in certain markets that weren't limited to GDPR was introduce certain data signals in the bid stream.
Yeah.
And so that led us to enable podcasting addressability, the actual reach of an audience versus content alone, which is new and innovative, and it's really a way that advertisers in some markets like Australia and the US really prefer to buy media. 80% of media budgets are bought on audience. And so addressability there has led us to work with some of the largest retailers in the country that originally were only buying sponsorships. And so not only are they using audience data now to target, but they can measure things like cost per acquisition, in-store attribution, online visits, app downloads. We can kind of measure it all, and that helps us with the creative again. And you could kind of take that measurement back and say which creative unit worked more effectively, what message resonated the most, the tone of the message. Is it loud? Is it too fast? Is it too slow? And then finally, you can also discover new hosts. And I think one of the biggest limitations to podcasting was how buyers were buying. They were buying based on a bias. We know this host, they have the largest audience, and we're going to keep buying those hosts. And so all of the media budgets were being aggregated to 12% of the podcast. But there's millions of other podcasts that no one's listening to, especially hosts that have maybe a smaller audience but a very loud or popular voice, or they talk about a subject that's very important, and so their listeners are very loyal. Using the data has allowed us to create discoverability of new hosts and podcasts, and we're driving more revenue to a larger pool of hosts. So it's sustaining the industry itself and helping advertisers discover where their consumers truly are listening versus where they're assuming they're listening.
And that's so interesting, because when I think about the podcasts that I actually consume, the podcasts that I consume are not with famous people.
Right, exactly.
They're just people. There's this woman that I love, and she basically does a podcast, and it's all about murder, mystery, and makeup.
True crime.
And I just love true crime podcasts. I will listen to them all the time. And then I listened to another podcast, which is host. I'm not a lesbian, by the way. This will become clear when I talk about it. But it's
where is this going?
It's a podcast that's hosted by 2 black lesbians from the UK. It's a very niche podcast, and it's hilarious. And I listen to it all the time, and I catch on upon it every week. And it's something that I actually schedule in when's the next one going to drop and stuff like that. But if I was looking at it from an advertiser perspective, and they'd probably put me in the category of listening to Fern Cotton's podcast, and I'm not really that into Fern Cotton. Yeah, she's a big name, but actually those are the podcasts that I'm really engaged with. I might listen to Fern's podcast like every other week or something like that.
mean, there's so many words that ring alarms that you just use that brands will block that content entirely.
Black, lesbian.
Exactly.
There was a point to my story. I wasn't just talking about myself. We got there in the end, didn't we?
Brought it back.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's all about like letting the consumer dictate what they're listening to, especially if you're in like certain communities use dialect that is very unique to them.
Yeah.
So a word in that community could mean something positive, but from an advertiser perspective, it's negative. And I use the word bomb all the time because in America, there are certain communities that use the word bomber, like that's a bomb lipstick. So they're describing a really great lipstick, but the word bomb will be blocked as being negative or political. And so removing those biases, I think, and just listening to where the consumer is actually consuming content is much more effective.
And that kind of takes us into the brand safety realm, which I wasn't going to go there, but we're here now, so let's go there, right? What can advertisers, and whoever wants to answer can answer, what can advertisers do, or what tools are there that exist for brand safety in the audio space? Janny, have you got any?
Yeah, with pleasure. At Adswizz, we have the contextual podcast targeting, and actually this is a good example. We won an award with NPR, it's National Public Radio. It's a heavy podcaster platform in the US. And this technology has been utilized because they allow brands to avoid certain topics, such as, for this case, the Ukraine war, and it guaranteed to be in a safe place and to check on the contextual of the podcast. So yeah, we do this technology.
We're all getting blown away. We're getting blown away. Right. So because we are getting blown away, and actually, you guys are really good. You make my job really easy because you actually answer some of my questions when you actually respond. So I know it's brilliant because it just means I get to listen and I get to learn. So I love this. Now I'm going off on another one of my tangents, but bear with me. So when I was growing up, Justine's already heard this before, JB. And when I was growing up, I loved American talk shows. So, and if I could be anybody in the world, I'd be Oprah. Like, when you have that thing, like, who would play you in a movie of your life? Like, I'd be like Oprah. Like, I genuinely love Oprah. And I love like talk show hosts and stuff like that. And I love Jerry Springer.
Oh my goodness!
And the
really?
reason why I loved him, it was for the final thought.
Oh, okay.
Because it used to be all chaos, and then at the end, he used to come and say something deep and profound, and it was his final thought. So we're going to get into the final thought section of this panel, right? So let's think about, if you could, in one sentence, what is the sort of the piece of insight or advice that you want the audience to leave with? So if we could give them something, what would you say about audio that you want people to remember and come away from this panel thinking, yes, this is what I know about audio? And Elli, I'm coming to you first because you're making that face.
Okay, I'm thinking. Obviously, I have a great poker face. I think what I would say is, I think back to a commercial that played when I was a child that used to say, it's 10 p.m., do you know where your children are? So I think about it often in podcasting because of the preconceived notions, and I always think about the investment gap, because there's so much growth in podcasting. The percentage of listeners that's there is massive, and yet investments aren't coming into podcasting as quickly enough. So I always leave the audience with, it's 2023, do you know where your audience is?
Oh, I like that one.
It's quite catchy, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
And I feel like
it is really
good.
good.
Mic drop, come down. Hannah, I'm going to come to you next.
Mine now sounds quite bland because it's not like a catchy catchphrase. But I think for me it would be, I hate to use the phrase the next big thing, but really the audience that we have for almost any brand, podcasting is becoming a huge thing, and so is the kind of personalization of audio, whether that's SoundCloud, Spotify, whatever it is. So it is kind of the next big frontier. So as much as there's still questions and queries about it, my advice is to just get involved and get testing, figure out where that audience is, figure out what works for your brands, because it's a really, really valuable place to play in. So don't let it kind of pass you by.
Yeah. So it's like feel the fear, but do it anyway.
Yeah, if we want to put a catchphrase on it, let's go with that one.
I came up with it when you were talking.
Love it.
So yeah. Last but not least, my friend, mon ami.
Wow.
We
know that
French for you.
You're good. We know that audio is all about content, so I would say rely on technology to guarantee the best user experience that you could have for your audience with engagement. So rely on technology is my...
Rely on technology.
Yeah.
I like it. So we've come to the end of the panel, but I'm open to questions from the floor. Does anybody have anything that they want to speak to our esteemed panel about? Any questions? No? Oh yes, I see hands. Yes, come on, Chris. Say what's your name and where you're from, please.
Chris from Caras Media. We're a social agency. I was curious sort of where you're seeing the budgets come from. So like what other channels, what other platforms?
Great question.
Move? So is it out of home? Is it TV? Like what is dropping in favour of audio?
It's actually one of the biggest challenges is the agencies don't know that answer either. And so is it digital?
That's the point.
Is it audio? Is it linear? It's coming from different places. We do see a lot of social because of the challenges social has experienced. And so advertisers had to shift budgets very rapidly with the changes there and the legalities. CTV also, we sense that there's a saturation. I think maybe there's a ceiling that advertisers have hit. They can't reach they can't find as much CTV audiences and supply, and so podcasting is a natural extension to that because it's a incremental reach of the same audience, but also the technology is nuanced in the same way, so it kind of makes sense for them. It's easy to transition. And the third place where we're seeing it is like audio in general, where podcasting up until now maybe was bucketed into audio. We're seeing a separation, and so budgets are coming from like digital audio or terrestrial linear radio. Those three buckets, I think.
Does anyone else have anything to add? Or you, no? Good. And yes, what's your name and where you're from?
Hello, I'm Luke and also from Caras, like Chris. I was curious about your guys' perspective on the role that cross-platform pollination is having on podcasting, because I'd imagine this is the same for everyone here. A lot of the podcasts that I listen to, I will also receive on places like TikTok, places like Snapchat. And is that a good thing for the podcasting platforms, or is that a bad thing, seeing that content is being served across those other places for you guys?
Is it a good thing?
Is it? Should I?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
No.
I think it's a
Is
good
it?
thing.
Yeah.
We may not own the experience as a podcast marketplace, but I think the whole point is following the influencer and the host, and then understanding. And so the advertising agencies and the brands can then follow the whole journey.
Yeah.
And so as an agency partner, I think that's where you come in and bring value, is finding the right content and the influencer, and then being able to extend outwards, because that's when you really become part of that narrative with that host, and then really can take that back and inform your media decisions. But yeah, we don't see social as being a blocker. We actually think it's a natural extension to the life of a host.
Extend reach.
Yeah, exactly. And then you can even experiment with experiential live events. I mean, all of that, like, you know, live events especially is huge, and I think it's another emerging platform trying to figure out how do we move with this host where they go and entertain with them as they entertain and live with them as they live. And that's really the magic of hosts. We're very connected to them within their podcast, but also within their lives. Like, what are they up to? What are they interested in? So I think social platforms like that and TikTok really help engage and bring it to life. We do many executions that bring in social platforms, even though we're not a social platform ourselves. Yeah.
To build on that point, I was at Amazon Port yesterday and I was watching will.i.am and Kiki Palmer record her podcast live, and it was brilliant. I laughed so much at times I cried, and I at first when I thought, we're going to be watching a podcast filmed live, I thought, it's going to be a bit rubbish, like what's that? And then I loved it. I was like cackling away, and like I was really engaged. So yeah, I love that live event aspect, and it was something I never really kind of thought of. I didn't really think of that. So yeah, got room for one more question if there is one. Oh, go on, my love.
Hello, I'm
I
wondered.
She's not a plant.
I'm not a plant.
She's not making it.
Sure.
So I wondered from the panel what you think is the most complementary media to audio.
Nice question. Janny?
I didn't hear the question.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
sorry.
Okay.
It was a nice one.
I can say it aloud. What media do you think is most complementary to audio? So if it was going to work in conjunction with other things, so like, I don't know, out of home, blah blah blah.
You mean we can combine audio with
yeah,
of course. So audio is very strong for engagement, and you can combine with display ad format for conversion. So yeah, you can do a lot and mix ad format to increase conversion.
Is there any in particular that you think, or Hannah, from what your perspective from an agency, have you seen combination of audio and other channels working well together?
I think one that's really interesting is definitely with out of home. Both ways. So you can obviously do audio ads targeted to people who have kind of been passing out of home using the mobile ID. But then we've also been looking at some of the opposite. So again, kind of using model audiences from the mobile IDs around people who've kind of been exposed to an audio ad, and then where those clusters are, buying out-of-home screens against that. That's a bit more clunky and it's a bit more out there, but I think coming back to that point about experiential, it's trying to expand maybe the experience of audio into IRL. And I think that's really, really interesting, because I think movement of audiences is another thing, to your point about where is your audience. That's what makes kind of programmatic out of home really interesting, is like the movement of audience and how you can capture that, and audio is another one for that. In theory, video is as well, but if you think about how users are consuming audio, a lot of that is on the move.
On the go, on the
So
move.
yeah, that's what I would say.
I was a judge at the Campaign Tech Awards, and a great example there that used audio platform that I'm not going to say their name, and Strava, the running app, and Marks and Spencer's for running gear. And basically the campaign, I wanted it to win, but the other judges didn't, so that's the end of it. But the campaign was really interesting in that it used Strava to track where people were and stuff like that. It could also send them visual ads for M&S, but was using the GPS to work out where they were, and there was some type of API that was only showing them the sports gear that was in stock, like in stock, and then obviously they had playlists and stuff like that with the audio. So it was honestly, the campaign was phenomenal. The other judges were crazy, and I don't know why they didn't win it. But that's all we've got time for today. But I hope that you've enjoyed the panel. I hope you've learnt more about audio, digital audio, if you haven't, programmatic audio. The Adswizz team are here, the women in programmatic team are going to be here. They've got some rosé, we've got some drinks, so stay around to have a chat. If you are shy and you're like I know some people don't like asking a question, panellists will be here for your questions as well. But thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.